Welcome to the Be Human Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Oliveyah Fisch. This is a space to practice. It's a space to return to your truth, deepen your self-trust, and remember who you're here to become. Together, we practice being human medicine for ourselves first, and then for the world. Let's begin. Hello, welcome to the Be Human Medicine podcast. I am your host, Oliveyah Fisch, and today's conversation is with Beth Rodden. I have been really looking forward to talking to Beth. She is a world-class rock climber. She is an author, she is a mother, and she has lived through things most of us will never face, but somehow she came out the other side more herself and is really an example of someone who I think is living authentically. And I do think that we need as many examples as possible today of women living their authentic life. So today we are not just talking about survival. We are talking about what it actually takes to stop performing and really start living from your true authentic self. So it's a good one. Let's dive in. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Beth. I'm so happy to have you here. I have been really looking forward to this conversation. I got to meet you in Yosemite at a YPO event. This was probably now last year already. And I've been dying to have a conversation with you since I got to hear you speak. And I got to climb up a mountain with you. And my daughter, Abby, got to climb for the first time in Yosemite with you. And she was very inspired. So I just want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm honored.
Yeah, I have your book right here that I just absolutely love because I got to really feel like I got to know you through this book. You really share a lot in here vulnerably. And so, yeah, thank you for saying yes to this conversation and being willing to just share your medicine with this community. So,
yeah, thank you. No, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to chat, and it was a pleasure to meet you. And last fall in Yosemite, it was such a treat.
Yeah. So let's just dive straight in. I would love for you to share with people a little bit about your story. And I know that you are a world-class rock climber, you're an author, you're a mama, and I would love for you to just dive into what you've written in A Light Through the Cracks.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it's a book that, is kind of like it's a memoir, and it's kind of a coming of age story, but with, climbing as the arc. I started climbing when I was a teenager, back in the mid-90s. Climbing was kind of like this fringe sport back then. But I fell in love with it and, really started to excel in it. And so, the book kind of takes an arc through where climbing took me, kind of lessons I learned along the way, and until a bit after becoming a mom. So it's quite a big arc in there, and, some very big adventures and things that came later of like pushing against kind of this like very macho bravado narrative that I grew up with in the climbing community, and trying to make it a more accepting space where people can be a little bit more vulnerable and kind of real humans.
It's amazing. I would love to hear a little bit about your, about 20 years ago, your journey here, being kidnapped and the start there, not because it's maybe the most dramatic part of your story, but because I think it's the crack that everything else poured through. And when you came home after, when you talk about your story, that experience, the world kind of celebrated it as this wild adventure story. But what actually happened inside you that maybe nobody has asked you about?
No, it's a great question. Yeah, so like for listeners, back in the early 2000s, climbing was very much like a male-dominated sport, very much like celebrated skirting death, kind of even more than an athletic achievement. And so I was on a climbing trip over to Kyrgyzstan with my boyfriend at the time and then two of our friends. And it was like a sponsored trip. And kind of how it works in the climbing community is companies will pay for your trip and travel, and then in exchange, like there's a photographer there and they get to use those images for their marketing purposes. It's like still kind of how it works in the climbing community these days. So we were over there, and partway through our trip, unfortunately, we, were in the middle of this insurrection type of thing. There was these rebels from one country passing through the valley we were in to try and overthrow a government of another country, and we got taken hostage. And we were held hostage for 6 days before we escaped. And so when we came back, the climbing community, because a lot of times, like these expeditions that companies use for their marketing purposes, they're just totally heroicized, right? It's like Bob climbed this mountain and, he had to go through this crazy storm and all these things of skirting death. And it was kind of like, that's why climbers are tougher than anyone else. And that's why you should buy our gear type of thing. And so that's kind of how we were welcomed back, like, oh, good job for like surviving and skirting death and all that sort of thing. And it was very rare, if not never asked, like, how are you actually doing? Like, what's going on? And we were all pretty darn young, like I was newly 20. I think I had turned 20 the month before we left. And the oldest member of our group was maybe 24 or 5 at the time. And so being in this community, I was like really ashamed and didn't want to admit that I was having nightmares or I was really scared or things like that. And so at the time, I just shoved everything down. And I think it was just this way to survive and, kind of go in the climbing community still. Because I loved climbing. I had dropped out of college to pursue professional climbing. It was something I kind of identified with and still really wanted to be a climber, but I didn't know how to be a climber and kind of show this human side of me as well. And so I just kind of like blocked off the human side of me and tried to kind of be this like rough and tumble person that that I thought the climbing community wanted.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. I know you speak about this. You got to give a talk to the YPO community, and we got to hear your story. You're an amazing speaker, by the way. I know you don't think that you are, but I was hearing a lot of praise about that guest speaking event that we got to go to. So
Thank
I
you.
would highly recommend anybody who's listening for a corporate event or any kind of event for inspiration to be having you in the room. It's really powerful. I
Thank you.
I think that, you write about and you speak about something I think a lot of women are going to recognize in themselves. And it's this thing where, you took the fear and the trauma, the thing you couldn't really even maybe name, and you channeled it into this climbing harder and training more and controlling your body and what you ate. And can you talk about what that looked like from the internal story, from the inside? Because I'm sure, as you're saying, like from the outside, people are praising you and, thinking that, this is, you got your whole life ahead and you're young and you made it through and glorifying this. So, how did you handle that? And then what did you do next?
No, it's a great question. I feel like, yeah, coming back from Kyrgyzstan, um, I felt like I was just treading water for probably a year and a half, right? And barely treading water, kind of like lost treading water because I
Mhm.
I didn't kind of know where to go, if that made sense. Like I really wanted to be a climber still. Like I didn't feel like I wanted to go back to college because I felt equally as lost going back to college. But I feel like I was in this point where I wanted to be this climber, but I didn't know how to do it. And so what I did is I just went all in on climbing. And I thought that to maintain this kind of level of being able to do it in a certain way, I had to live a very rigid life, right? Like if I went out of kind of this like bumper life that I kind of was trying to set up for myself, then that's where things would start to get hard and messy and out of control, because I would then relate it to Kyrgyzstan, right? Like if I went out to a place that I didn't know very well, or if I went to a climb that I didn't know very well, like something bad could happen, if that makes sense, right? Because that's what happened in Kyrgyzstan. So I was very controlled. I was very controlled with what I ate. I was very controlled with like who was in my circle, because it was very hard for me to trust other people. I was very controlled with like my achievements, and I became very like goal-oriented, achievement focused. And I attached like a lot of my worthiness to that, which I don't think is unique to climbing as a sport, right? I think athletes do that a lot because it feels good, right? You do something and then everyone outside tells you how great you are and that you're wonderful, and you're like, oh, well, that's a pretty easy way to feel good about myself if everybody's telling me. So I feel like I kind of wrapped everything up into this ball of control around my climbing, and I lived that way really strictly for, like a decade, and I felt like safe in that way. I felt like worthy in that way. I just felt like this was a way that I could kind of make it through life without having to like crack through any of those barriers and walls that I put up around Kyrgyzstan.
I think that, part of why your story has resonated with me so much is because I hear versions of this story so often, even though yours is exaggerated because it's like this big kidnapping and then you're a world famous climber and you've got the cameras on you and the spotlight on you. But I do hear this story so often in certain ways. And I think that if I'm honest, it's also my story as well of
Yeah.
just, back in my 20s, I had a obsessive compulsive desire to train really hard and, you know, wake up in the morning and think, okay, I got to go run 8 miles to be okay today, essentially. And I did not have the same trauma that you had, but it all stems from conditioning and trauma from the past, right? And that space of, having and wanting some control and needing to have some type of a a sense of control, even if that type of control is killing you or is not working or is not supporting you. And for many people, I think we could all find our own versions of that sometime in our timeline in our life. And I think as we get older, what happens is, in a lot of the communities I'm supporting as well, especially for women, are, working on exactly that. How do I shed these identities of what I think I'm trying to do to control the things around me, and is it working and is it not? And where am I getting my true needs met? And I'm wondering how you sort that out for yourself of, well, yes, there are certain things we can control and there's certain things we can't control. And where do we go from there when we recognize that some of the things we're trying to control are not working?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. It's so universal, like you said, right? Especially for women, I think too, because it's like it seems like there's a lot of barriers to be broken through. I think one of the key things for me starting to realize like what I can control or what's serving me or what not was to really start to question like the dialogues that I was kind of subscribing to and realizing like where those were coming from. Right. And so like a lot of these dialogues that I was subscribing to, especially around, there's so many, but like, for instance, the body image stuff or eating control issues. This all started to happen for me postpartum, right? Because I just kind of figured that I was this athlete, I was this professional climber. I wasn't going to be like my family members or like my normal friends. Like I'd be able to bounce back and be climbing and, like I controlled my body for a living. Like this is what I did. but once I didn't bounce back, right? Like I had a very hard physical postpartum with all these, you know, now they're very commonly talked about, but I feel like they weren't commonly talked about back then. Um, and so just seeing what my body actually was able to do with, growing a human, birthing a human, and then all of a sudden being ashamed that I couldn't like bounce back. I was like, well, why am I ashamed of this? Right? Like my body did this amazing thing. Where did I get this dialogue that I need to bounce back or need to look a certain way? And I started to realize that it's like these very old narratives that were, at least in the climbing community, by like these men that thought the only way to have worthiness or achievement was to look a certain way or say a certain thing. And I was kind of like, I don't actually think that's true, right? Like certain things are much more powerful and much more impressive to me than, losing 4 toes to get to the top of some snowy mountain. And so I think that's what I started to really question was like, why are we all subscribing to these beliefs? Why am I putting myself through all this anguish um, and worry and like trying to control these things when maybe that's not actually what I want to believe? And so I think once I started to kind of like question that dialogue, it started to make me question like why I was trying to have all this control in other parts of my life. And was it actually serving me? Or what would happen if I loosened my grip a little bit? Like, would it be like the end of the world? Like I've made it in my head for all those years, or would it be okay? And so I think that was kind of the beginning for me was like, wait, why are we thinking this way type of thing?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it sounds like you recognize you needed a broader perspective and you were recognizing that to stay so narrow in what was strong or beautiful or athletic had to be completely shifted in order for you to feel good in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what we're all going through to some extent. Talking to some clients that are coming to mind just recently around, how much do I want to go out and be social? Even, you know, like how much do
Totally.
I care about like being out and about and, catching up with people and being in the loop and things like that. To of course, our bodies are like it's like a never ending dialogue about how we're supposed to be looking at every age. And so I do think that there's this reckoning that gets to happen for each of us, and hopefully nothing traumatic has to happen for that reckoning to come and occur. But oftentimes it seems like it does. I'm wondering, do you feel like there has to be this big trauma or this big event, that happens in order for us to really want to incorporate what I would call spiritual practices that really create alignment? And I ask that because I think that was the theme that I was really hearing from you, is the importance of authenticity, the importance of, hey, you get to be who you want to be and you get to choose what you care about and you get support when you need it. So I'm just wondering, how important is it that these big events happen or this trauma happens, or maybe is it not needed, do you think?
No, I think that's a really good question and a really good thing to try and analyze. And obviously, like I can only speak from my life and what's happened to me. And you're right, it has been like kind of these big traumatic events. Or just big events, right? Like birth, I think was just like this great, like having our son was just like this great transformation for me. Um, it- Totally different than what I had thought it would be. I thought I would like, be pregnant, have the baby, and then just like kind of hop back on my, train of life here and just have this like accessory along with us. And I
Yeah.
didn't actually think like anything internal or like any awareness would change or whatnot.
Hmm.
So for me, maybe it has happened. And it's interesting because when I look at Kyrgyzstan, the actual event that happened, the actual kidnapping, And I don't know if it's because I was so young or if it's because of the climbing community, like the community I came back to and I like immersed myself in at the time. But I don't know if like a big awareness happened then. It was more kind of like, how can I build my life with these like walls of safety? Um, but I will say unpacking that big event was a huge transformation. Like, you know, having our son and kind of like going through that awareness and starting to question the dialogues that I was subscribing to was a huge thing. And within that, I started to think like, maybe I actually should go to therapy, over 15 years later for Kyrgyzstan, and going to therapy and unpacking this big event, not necessarily the big event itself, was a huge transformation and maybe like brought to my awareness that, I can shift things and my beliefs and what will serve me and be a little bit more and be much more authentic to myself and what I need and less like I think pandering to others is probably the wrong term, but I think for most of my 20s in the height of my athletic career, I did think that, smiling and saying yes all the time and being like that good girl served me, right, in this very male dominated athletic field. And I think once I started to go into my mid to late 30s and unpack Kyrgyzstan and kind of have this, um, understanding that I didn't necessarily have to do that all the time, and I could be a little bit more true to myself with what I wanted to have in my life and have as the fabric of, the people that are around me or the work that I'm doing. That really started to happen, once I went to therapy and started to get a little bit older. So it's a great question. Like, does somebody need it? And I often wondered that, like, does somebody need to go through a divorce or this or that to like be able to evolve into the person that they want to become? And I don't know. For me, it's happened that way, but I do still feel like even, I'm still evolving. And so maybe you just need to set your life up with the correct support networks, like
Yeah.
a partner that's supportive or a job that's supportive or a community or whatnot. But for me, I do feel like I've had these like big events that have kind of been catalysts for change.
Yeah. So let me see if I can understand kind of the arc of your story a little bit here. So you were, this was in your 20s when you were kidnapped. You came back, you kind of jumped right back into the world of climbing. Everyone was congratulating you for your greatness and heroic journey and escaping and all of the things. You were suffering inside. It sounds like you had some obsessive compulsive behaviors that were happening, but you didn't get support with that. Nobody was wanting to talk about that part. And you just kept going in your career. And then you did not get support for any of that until you were a mom, like after you were going through some depressive states after your son was born. And so what's that time frame between the kidnapping and then getting that support? Like, how long did that last?
Yeah, no, so I was kidnapped when I was 20, and then I went kind of through this really big arc and peak in climbing where I was just like pushing the sport forward for nearly a
Mhm.
decade. Um, with, my boyfriend at the time in Kyrgyzstan, I ended up marrying. And then, so that was 10 years. And then kind of like at the end of that 10 years, our marriage crumbled. And I ended up, we got divorced. And then I went through this period of like injuries and kind of my body breaking down and all that sort of thing after just, like we talked about living this very rigid life, like very restrictive in eating, very, um, just trained all the time for climbing because it's kind of what kept me afloat. And then eventually ended up remarrying and then, had our son. And then through that kind of transformation of becoming a mom, realized that, wow, maybe I should unpack Kyrgyzstan. And that's when I was in my mid to late 30s. So over 15 years later, that is,
Yeah.
is when that happened.
I mean, and that's heartbreaking just to think of you struggling for that long without anybody asking a real question to you.
Yeah. No, I
That's
mean, and when I look
world-building.
back on Yeah. No, and when I look back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like poor kids, in Kyrgyzstan. But during the time, it just seemed normal. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the saddest part of hard things when mental health is not talked about, because on the outside, it looks like you're achieving. And I know from me, when I was probably my most sick in my 20s, I was getting sponsorships from brands for me to wear their clothing, and getting paid to run up a mountain. So I think that that's the hardest part. I'm wondering, what do you feel like somebody should have asked you during that time that you would have actually listened, like a question that would have been like, oh, where you wouldn't have brushed it off. Does that make sense? Like, what question would have been a good question to ask you at that
totally.
time you were suffering without really even knowing it yourself?
Totally. And I've thought about that a lot. Because it's really interesting too, because, I don't know if everybody's like this when they're 19, 20, 23 or whatever, but I definitely was like, I've got it figured out. Like, don't listen, I won't listen to anything. But I do often wonder if somebody had come to me and said, like, no strings attached, you'll be able to keep your climbing career. Um, like, would you like to like go to therapy, or like, how are you actually doing? Like, is there anything that scares you on a day to day? Like, no shame in whatever you say. Um, like, I think maybe I would have listened to that. Like, if I knew that I could have kept a sponsor for 10 years or however long, and I didn't need to achieve something that year or 2 years or 3 years, because I could have like tried to address some things. Um, maybe maybe I would have jumped on that wagon, or maybe if I saw other examples of that. But at the time, it was just like climbing was an interesting thing, because unless you're in the competition world, and I did the competition world when I was in my teens, um, then it's kind of up to you to prove that you're worthy to sponsors, right? You need to go out. It's very self-driven. And I think that's why I love climbing so much, because it's just so self-driven, and I have a lot of that. But you need to go out and like you set your goals, and you have to train, and you have to accomplish these things. There's no coach. There's, no like, this is when you have to do this like formulaic thing. You kind of get to do it yourself. So I think if I saw other people being able to have some grace in like a few year period and still be sponsored, then I might have been able to be like, okay, maybe I can address this. But at the time, I was like, I have to do something every 6 months at least to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I don't get dropped by my sponsors, because like I need to pay the mortgage. I need, like all the things.
And when
Um,
you say something, you mean I need to go beat a record or do a big climb that people are going to want to read about and take pictures of and things like that. Okay.
exactly. Like something
Yeah.
that then the companies can then market, right?
Got
So,
it.
which I understand, it needs to be a mutually beneficial agreement.
Mhm.
Um, And so perhaps I would have listened to that. I also think it's just such a interesting thing, because it was just so different back then, right? Like even in like outside of the climbing community in 2000, like the late 90s, early 2000s, like therapy just wasn't that like talked about, right? Like I didn't know any of my parents' friends that were going to therapy. Like it just wasn't like a very common thing. So I feel like there might have just had to be a lot of different things out there, or a lot of things that were different for me to actually truly trust that I could have gotten help and then still maintained my career, if that makes sense, right? Because
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just so convinced that I had to do it this one way, because that's the way that I saw it being successful for other people. Um, that I was like, well, of course I have to do this, type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, and it worked out. And I mean, I think that you kind of came to a head in motherhood where it kind of forced you to like look yourself in the mirror in a different way and decide to say, okay, let's do this a little different. I think that motherhood does that to all of us, whether we want it or not,
Exactly. I think
Um,
you're right.
yeah, it's definitely one of those boot camps that'll just, have you be able to see what you were not willing to see before. And I guess I asked that question because even though the climate has changed, even though, you can find wellness on TikTok now, it's everywhere. Everything's around therapy and coaching and wellness and, having all of your people to support you, I still think that there's something to be said around this energy of knowing that, your intuition is saying like, oh, of course I'm not that happy. Of course this isn't great for me, but I also need it. I also need that kind of control so that I can pay the bills, do what I know I have to do. And also too, if I stop, I don't even know what's going to happen. Like I might just die was what I was thinking. Like I just like combust or something.
Yeah. Poof. Yeah.
Disappear. And so I think that, the shame is not the same and there's more access to information, thankfully, in the, just in athleticism in general. But I do see still that high performers, to an extent, are still run by the same program, whether that in all industries. So athleticism, executives, and people who are performing at the highest level, there's still what I call this washing machine is just like, so, and they might even have a therapist and a coach, they might even have the things that to go a little deeper and to get to know yourself. And I'm wondering, what is it going to actually take to have that not be what is running the show for women?
Yeah, it's such a good question, right? Because it's always like we have 15 balls in the air, everybody's like, well, before you stop one thing, you have to get your other flywheel going to make sure that it's going to be successful. And then you can go from this old flywheel to this wheel. And you're just like, it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's a great question. And I don't know if there's like an answer, right? But it's probably more personal, like what can each of us, what's the formula for specifically for each of us?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I know it's been a huge learning lesson and also kind of eye-opening to realize that like the wheels don't necessarily completely fall off the bus if like you don't get your other flywheel going perfectly and like whereas before I was like, okay, I have to be perfect on this and do this and do this. Like everything has to line up exactly right or like the dominoes will fall over. And like you said, like having a kid, dominoes never line up perfectly. And so it's kind of be like, oh, right. Like I can let that thing not slide, but like there's space for me to try and figure things out without having to be perfect on my next act in life or my next thing in life and give myself a little space. It's like after the book, it's just like with a big climb, everybody's like, what's the next climb? What's the next big project? And after the book, everybody's like, what's the next big project? And, like I purposefully made it. So it was the first time in my life where I haven't had a next big project on the horizon. And it's been like really refreshing to kind of like give myself a little bit of time to see like where are my interests or what does kind of like light the fires, and a lot of it is the same. Like I still want to go climbing, 4 days a week and I still want to go on these trips. But there are other things. It's like, I actually want to put more effort into these, talks that I do for companies or corporations, or like I took that coaching job in Hollywood that I wouldn't have done before because it wouldn't have been in the rigid, I'd be like, well, when am I going to train? When am I, so I was like, I'm allowing myself to breathe a little bit more broadly. And it's like, it's widening my breath a little bit. And it's interesting, but it is a little unnerving to be like, what is the next big thing? But I'm also kind of like, maybe it's okay.
It's so good. It is. It's like one of these things every morning. I'm still in the transition. I'll let you know how it goes. But I think that there's I think I'm at the tail end, which is really lovely. But there's an opportunity to say, can I trust that my authentic self is enough?
Yeah.
And
That's
then
a
like,
great
let me
way
go
to put
test it. Let me go test it. So this is how I think about it. Like, let me just see if me just being authentic is enough.
Yeah.
Every day. And I wake up, I'm like, okay, let's try it again. Okay, nothing happened. Okay, let's try it again. And sometimes I need a little reset midday even and be like, okay, what are we doing? Oh yeah, we're not over functioning. We're not overworking. Things actually just work out for me. I have a saying that I've been sharing it to everybody lately. I say, I get paid to exist. I just love it. It's edgy. I like edgy. So that I just
Right.
get paid to exist, and like it just works out. And so I think that there is a bit of trust you're talking about. I think what I'm hearing you say as well is that trust is a practice and that you need time and space. Just taking some space to not have the next thing. And that's the risk. The risk is like, I'm not going to have the next thing. I'm going to give myself a little bit of breather. And then look at all these cool things that pop up. I'm giving talks at YPO. I got hired by this actress to teach her how to climb for a movie. Like all of these things are coming into your space. And that's happening while you're just being yourself, being your authentic self. And you still get to climb 4 days a week. It's just fantastic. And so I just love that there's examples of that out in the world and that we are, as women, taking the risk to say, how about if I give myself more time? How about if I don't have everything perfectly in order? Like my type A perfectionist Capricorn, I want to know all the things. And how about if I don't do that and I just get to let go and also just receive some support too? Like I don't have to actually do it all by myself. So these are kind of like my highlight reels of how I'm experimenting with this past couple years. And and I don't even think I get it right all the time. I will dive in into I'm like, oh wait, what am I doing again? And try to pop out of it as soon as I can. I'm wondering how it's going for you and your nervous system to not have your, what I would call OCD plan about your life until eternity. How is that going for you?
Yeah, I feel like it's a constant okay, Beth, we're not doing that right now, type of thing. 'Cause it's a habit, right? And it's like if that habit has been there for decades, it's not going to change overnight. So it's yeah, it's a constant, it's intention to not go on the well-trodden path that, I lived for so long. But then it becomes habit the other way. And so it gets easier. It's gotten easier, over the last little bit. But I can definitely feel like when I'm stressed or nervous or something, I fall back into it. And then it's an intention to be okay, and actually let's just see what happens tomorrow instead of lining 17 things up type of thing. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of intent with it. It's not like this supernatural thing.
Yeah, I like that you're saying that it does get easier to do the other thing. I do agree with that. I will second that. Oh, this is easier than doing the overfunctioning thing. Talk to me about your practice of reframing. I know you have a strong practice of just reframing things. Tell me how that works for you.
Yeah, I think this is probably something that is when I feel myself falling back into the old tracks of, that type A, trying to get everything done. A lot of times I'll get part with your day and be I didn't go for my run. I didn't do this. I didn't get to train today. I didn't get to eat, whatever, climb. And before that would kind of tank my day. Right. And I'd be really sad about it. And I kind of beat myself up and that. And instead I'm trying to reframe it. It's oh yeah, you didn't go for your run this morning because instead you went and you helped mom do something at the house that she needed help with, which was really important and valuable. And, you want to be there for her. And yeah, you didn't get to climb because instead, you went to your son's game and you got to watch that. And, that's a very bookended window in life that you're going to be able to do that. And so I try and do that with a lot of things, right? Where I used to kind of beat myself up and, really this is the only way to feel good about yourself if you do these things. Now I'm trying to reframe it and be oh, well, you're right. You didn't, go to bed early and be able to wake up and train because you went out with your girlfriends, but that was really important and you got to share and you got to laugh and all that sort of thing. So I try and do that to when I catch myself kind of falling back into my old ways a little bit.
I love that. You're also naming this thing that sometimes is not talked about, which is just like the recap of all the things we didn't do, right? That we the shoulda, woulda, coulda, I call it, right? And so whether that's happening, by 10 a.m., by lunchtime, or by the evening, I think that that is something that many of us do. It's like, I didn't do this. I didn't do, even if I did, I did a workout, but it's kind of like 50%, like there's, it's like, I wasn't actually, that last set, I could have added 25 more pounds. I didn't do that, whatever it is, So this is like the woulda, shoulda, coulda. In that moment, what I'm hearing you say, as soon as that comes in your mind, you're just like, what, pausing? You're just doing this like just in real time. You're still doing your life. Are you sitting down and do this? Or are you just like, nope, I can do it in real time and then just go back and say, well, but because I chose this instead. Is that what's going on?
Yeah. I don't think it's like I stop what I'm physically doing. I think it's more of like, there's always something going on in my head. It's whether it is. And so it's those, what you said, would have, should have, could have, going on in my head. And then I'm like catching myself and just in my head being like, well, no, like the dinner with your girlfriends or having those people over or whatever was actually really valuable, and it was actually really nourishing. Or to the other part where, it could have been like, oh, I feel bad for turning down their dinner invitation, or I didn't go to her baby shower, or what, like I should have, now she's not going to like me. And then just in my mind, like recalibrating and be like, you're exhausted. Like you were out all day, helping mom or doing this or what. And so it's like, you need to give yourself a reset type of thing. So it's kind of like catching my thoughts as they come in and kind of being and reframing them then. So it's not like I sit down and do it. It's kind of more like in the moment as the thoughts are coming. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So as thoughts come in real time, you're just reframing them to what you chose instead and why, essentially. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how about if it is like you didn't have a good excuse to not? So how about if one pops in and you're like, that was not the best choice?
Yeah, that's a great question. Then I feel like I try and just give myself grace, like no one's perfect,
Okay, great. Okay.
Like I try to give myself grace and just be like, like I'm sure you do this or a lot of people do this. Like I look at the week and I'm like, okay, well I have like these things all throughout the week. So I'm like, I can fit this in here and this in here. And it's very like, you're trying to fit it in. You've got a kid, you've got a career, you've got life, you got yourself, your partner, whatever. And sometimes I'm like, oh, this is my one day to climb. I just can't do it any other days. And sometimes if I'm like, well, I didn't climb that day just because I was tired or something, I like try to acknowledge like you were exhausted. That's a lot of times when you get injured is when you try to push through. And so I just try to give myself grace that like no one's perfect. Trying to live up to the perfect standard didn't ever really serve you great. And go from there. I don't do it perfectly all the time though, right? Sometimes I get blue and I'm like, oh, I really wish I would have done this, But
yeah,
that's also
okay. That self-compassion is a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one for us to all have a post-it on in every room about like self-compassion. You're a human being. You're not going to get it right all the time. You mentioned your mom a couple of times here. You're taking care of her. What's happening with your mom?
Oh, my dad passed just a few months ago. And so it's just, and maybe I'm projecting because she's doing okay. But, I'm like, oh, mom's alone. And so I want to go help her and be with her and that type of thing. So I feel like, and she's had a couple health issues pop up and now that she's alone. So, I don't think I'm ever going to regret that. Like taking a day and going and being like, oh, I'm going to drive mom up to stay with us for a couple of days or whatnot, that type of thing.
Yeah. We know you're talking about this, like the things we hold, so I'm so sorry to hear about your father passing and then, wanting to spend as much time with your mom as you can. You have a son who's how old now?
He's 12 now.
He's 12, so he's quite little. He needs you still. He still probably likes you enough to like want you at his games.
Currently.
And then you're married and you have a life and you like to climb. So here it is, like all the things, and you have speaking engagements I'm sure you're flying to at times and things like that. And so I think I'm bringing this up because there's a time in life, it seems like a season of life where we've got young kids and then the parents and then the career. And none of that should be happening all at the same time, in my opinion, to anybody, to any of us. And this is why I think grace, compassion, recognizing that, yes, sometimes you need to go and choose having your friends' night out and have a laugh or whatever instead of training, or to say no to the friends to go to bed on time or whatever it is. Like, but to choose each day, each moment, how are we going to honor ourselves and all that we're carrying? And even just to notice all that we're carrying so that we're not thinking we're weak or we should have it all together all the time. I think that that is part of the reframe I'm hearing that you're doing too, is just taking an honest look at what you're carrying and then recognizing that you're not going to get it perfect. Is that what's happening? That's what's going on for you?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting. I just think, maybe it's cliche to say, but as you get older, you can kind of put things into perspective more. Whereas like, in my 20s, I was so desperate to like make sure I got X, Y, and Z done and I lived a certain way and that type. And now I'm like, okay, we will survive if, the dishes aren't done tonight. Or we will survive if like I say no to this one work commitment, type of thing. And so I think it's just realizing that and realizing like what I need more in that moment to make sure that I can, and then I think it's true that then I can show up more present for the next thing. Whereas if I keep ignoring that and keep putting that second or third or fifth on the list, then I'm not going to be able to show up, very, very much to the next thing or the next thing or the next thing.
Yeah. I'm curious to know how much of what you've learned is translated into how you're parenting.
Oh, oof, that's a good question. I think it helps, right, to have the reframe. It helps to know that like no moment is forever, because I think sometimes I can get stuck to be like, what the heck is happening right now, and like this is terrible, and I'm messing this up or whatnot, or be like, okay, well that happened, and this moment isn't forever, or yeah, we didn't get to do this today, or we didn't do that perfectly today, but we got to do this or X, Y, and Z. So I think the reframe is really helpful for me, in parenting. And I feel like that whole saying, like the days are so long, but the years are so short, to realize that like there's a really long road here. And like my perfectionist ways, like wish I could do something different in like a certain moment, but then realizing that we're all just humans in the family and we're trying our best. So I think that's really helped me. Whereas I think if I would have had kids early on in my 20s, I would have been a wreck of a mom because, like I would have thought that we had to be so rigid in how we did things and like, um, you know, how you measure yourself or how you measure, or I would have put that off onto our kids or whatever. And that would have been really unfair. So,
Yeah. So talk to me about how important community is to you now.
gosh, I feel like it's really big for me. Realizing that I can't shoulder the whole world by myself, even though I kind of felt like that for a long time. And it helps to know that you're not alone in a lot of these things, right? A lot of your feelings or actual physical things. And that always helps, like I don't think I could have survived early motherhood without a handful of my close friends that were also in early motherhood, right? Because it's just like such a wild transformation time, and you're kind of like, am I the only one feeling this way or going through this? And so I think it's really huge for me. Whereas, because I was so closed in my 20s, I didn't really value it hardly at all back then.
Mm. Do you feel like they allow you or support your authenticity? And if so, how?
Absolutely. And I think it's a lot of that falls on me too, because I'm much more open with what I need or what I don't need. Like my friends know I'm an introvert. My friends know that like I want to go to bed at, 9. And so if we're going to have dinner, like, everybody needs to be gone by 8:30. And so it's like they extend the invitation, but don't get offended if I'm like, I can't go tonight or I can't do that. And so I feel like but they would have never known that if I hadn't been able to name that, right? And so they definitely understand that. And, I have some friends the same. I have other friends that like huge events and stay out late. And, I can go to only a couple of those, but it's not like we're not friends because of that, So it's really nice that
Mm.
way.
Do you do anything consistently or on a regular basis that allows you to connect with that authenticity? Is that for you climbing or is that something else?
I'd say a few things. Like if I can't climb because of work or an injury or something like that, um, just being like going out and having like quiet time moving by myself. So usually just like walking our dog or something like that is like when I feel like I can have that. And a lot of times too, I just need like quiet time. I'm self-employed, so like my office is the home, and so I need quiet time at the home. That's like when a lot of my creative times come into my brain and that type of thing. So I think my family knows that, my friends know that, and now I know that. Whereas before, I would kind of push through it and be like, well, why can't I just be around people all the time and have this type of thing? And so now I'm just much better at recognizing, oh, actually, like I just need a couple days where I can reset. And I need to get that. And so I think like having my quiet time is when I get more in touch with like what I need and like my authenticity and stuff like that.
Beautiful. So tell me a little bit about what creativity looks like these days for you.
I still like to write. So I still like putting thoughts down on a page. And whether that goes anywhere or not, that's fine. And I do actually find that a lot of the talks are kind of like a creative time because it's, learning what whoever the client is wants me to come, why did they hire me? And seeing like how I can kind of shape a story or, um, a presentation that will connect with that type of audience. So that's pretty fun for me. It reminds me a lot of like writing a book or even a climbing project where, you start with all these pieces and somehow you have to like put them together to get there. Um, but again, like I need quiet time to do that. So a lot of times, a lot of my talks are crafted like on a trail in the woods with nobody around, just me talking to the woods type of thing. That's when I practice.
I love that. That is so beautiful. Yeah, I wrote my first book mostly from voice to text on my phone while I was hiking.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I know that well. Well, I'm so glad we got to do this today. I'm wondering if you can, we'll just end with the final question I like to ask all my guests is if you were going to share with my 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old daughter a piece of advice that if you shared this with her now, you knew she wouldn't forget, what would that be? What wisdom
Mm,
would you share with her?
that is a great question. I would probably say trust yourself.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Trust yourself no matter what. It might be bumpy, but you know what you need. So,
beautiful,
yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me again today and with the audience that we have here at Be Human Medicine. And I hope that we can stay connected. I think you're a beautiful example of authentic living. And I know you don't see yourself as a teacher, but you have taught me so much of just reflecting back your story has made me reflect some of my own. And I just really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. No, it's been such a honor and privilege, so I appreciate it. And yes, I hope we stay connected. That would be
Where can
wonderful.
people find you, hire you, talk to you? How does that happen? How does that work?
Yeah, I guess I'm a sporadic Instagram poster. So that's where I like if there's updates. And then I do have a website that I think has a contact me page through there or
Okay.
Instagram. Yeah.
Great. We'll
Yeah.
put all of that in the show notes. I'll also link to your book. I think everybody should read this book. It's fantastic. And hire Beth for all of your inspirational talks at your on-sites. She's incredible. So I'll look forward to connecting with you soon, Beth. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Liv. You too.
Thank you for being here. If this episode resonated, subscribe and share it with someone who would love it too. And if you're ready to go deeper, start your 14-day free trial of the Be Human Medicine app. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, stay open and keep becoming.